Hello and welcome to another episode of Heart Wild Podcast. I am so honored today to be sitting here with wildlife conservationist Simon Naylor. Hello and welcome.
Thanks, Carrie. It's great to chat to you again. I can't remember when the last time we spoke, but I think it was last year actually, or earlier this year. But yeah, great to be chatting again.
Yeah, I think it was a year ago when we actually were talking about, it was about rhino dehorning and the work you do, which I
That's
think
right.
is amazing. But we're actually going to today talk more about your passion and your life path. Before we go too deep, though, I always like to start the conversation with how you and I met. Would you like to take the stage, or I'm happy to share that story?
No, you can start, and then I can fill in the gaps. Um,
Perfect. So
yeah,
I actually knew about you before I met you. Um, my father was very generous and he took me to Pinda in 2019 as a guest. And our guide at the time kept talking about the program, the wildlife conservation program, and just the work you were doing. And it really stirred up a lot of interest. And I kind of dug deep and I was in awe. I'm just impressed with the work you do. And even though we're not going to talk about the work so much, to give people an example of some of your achievements, I witnessed or got to see how you had an abundance, enough white rhino to put them in an airplane and fly them into
yeah,
another country. Like, to me, that just blew my mind away. And so during COVID, I was losing my mind like a lot of people. I needed to get out and do something. I had been an activist for so long, and sitting around and doing nothing was really eating me up inside. And just a few days later, I saw an ad for Pinda to come and volunteer. And I was like, that's it. I'm coming. And so about 6 months later, I showed up, and then I got to actually meet you. And I was, at the first time, I was like so starstruck and so in awe. Like, I couldn't even talk. I'm like, oh my God. And then one night we were working, we were actually trying to help a cheetah, and we had some time on our hands. And while we were waiting for the vet to come, and that's when we just got to talk. And I got to see the human of Simon. And that's basically how we got to here we are today.
I do recall, um, you know, sitting for about 2 hours, under the moonlight, and chatting, and there was obviously other volunteers in the vehicle, and we were just sort of talking about some of the issues around, conservation in Africa, and and how, I guess, we're trying to save Africa's problems, wildlife issues.
One thing that I know about you is that um, you studied nature conservation, and then right out of the gate, you went into the industry. You excelled. You've done really well in wildlife conservation. And it seems like you had an early start. How did you know that that was what you wanted to do? How did you know that was your purpose?
Um, I, I don't recall a time when I sort of knew. I think um, it's quite strange, because I remember at school, there was, and I think it happens to a lot of kids at school. They don't really know what to do after school. They don't really know what they want to study and what sort of career they want to do. And I always just knew. I don't know why or when that happened. I think it just comes from a childhood of spending a lot of time in the bush, in the wildlife, and just loving nature. And I was it was very clear to me what I wanted to do after school. And you know, we were, fortunately in South Africa, conservation or nature conservation is a career. And we're blessed with a lot of wild areas and game reserves and national parks. Back then, we didn't have private reserves. They just didn't exist. So, if you wanted to do nature conservation, you had to sort of enter the sort of public protected area organizations. And so that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sort of a game ranger and then work in a national park or game reserve. And funny enough, I really wanted to work in Zululand, where Pinda is. That was my dream, and it didn't really matter where it was. It just needed to be in that area, just because I sort of grew up in that area or close by, and got to know it really well as a kid. So yeah, I don't know when it was, but I just always knew. I mean, I didn't even do sort of career development or these assessments that a lot of kids do, to try and figure out what they're good at. I was very single-minded. I knew what I wanted to do. So I finished school and applied for, at that time was one of only two places where you could do a sort of a wildlife management degree in Cape Town. And I was very, very fortunate to be accepted straight after school, to go and study in Cape Town. And, they only chose, I think it was about 30 odd people in the country. So, yeah, I was very, very fortunate, that my sort of career path was I didn't have to wait, to get into it. So straight from school, I went to university to study wildlife management.
It was just in your heart. You just knew. You didn't. It was just part of you.
Well, I just knew, and I think maybe that that sort of came through in the motivations and the applications that we had to do. Because I mean, in South Africa, it's even to this day, we maybe 30 odd years later, lots of kids want careers, in the bush and in conservation. I mean, and back then it was the same, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of school leavers, wanted to be game rangers. I mean, it was the sort of dream job that everyone aspired to, either to be a vet or a game ranger. I mean, that's what most kids wanted to do. So yeah, I just knew what I wanted to do, and I was very blessed and fortunate to be sort of accepted in a really good course, that set me up for later in life, and so yeah, that's how it started.
But even then, like, even though your path and it's something that you jumped on and you were excelling, even we change as individuals. We grow, we evolve our path. And recently you did just take a little bit of a turn on your path. You left Pinda, which you've been at for a long time. And how do you know when it's time to change, and how do you navigate that?
You kind of know when it's time to move on and time for change. And I don't think there's sort of one specific thing that comes together. It's a sort of a number of things that sort of come together, and you just sort of know that it's time to move on. I mean, I think 15 years, I mean, you talk to any person in the workspace, and they will tell you that, if you've worked in the same job for 15 years, there's something wrong with you, and either you don't have ambition, or you don't have the abilities to sort of rise, and sort of gain additional responsibilities, or just sort of move up in the ladder, But for me, it wasn't something. I mean, that job that I did for 15, 16 years kept me so motivated, and I was never short of motivation or challenges. That's the thing. But I think it was just a combination of a number of factors, that sort of made me consider moving on and changing my career and changing my workplace and home and all these sort of things. So I think you just sort of, it doesn't happen overnight. It just sort of, it's something that just sort of happens over a short, period of time. And in my case, it was maybe, yeah, it was about a year, 6 to 12 months. It just sort of, yeah, it was, perhaps time to change. I needed change, needed a new challenge and new opportunity. There was new opportunities and um, something came along and I yeah, made the decision to change. So, but I and yeah, but the 15, 16 years that I had at Pinder were incredible. I wouldn't change it for anything. I have no regrets. Just because of the incredible opportunities that it afforded me in life and travel and for my family and but just, yeah, the personal growth and a satisfaction of achieving a lot of great things, and good things. And the causes that we had was really yeah, personally very satisfying. So
Well, you really have
yeah,
to be tapped in to notice, tapped into yourself. And it's like you said, if you were not evolving, if you were in the same position after 15 years, then and not wanting to change and not wanting to grow, that's almost the red flag. Like, why am I not changing? Why am I not growing? And you have that, all that experience, all that background, and it's changed you. You've evolved. And so kind of your bigger dreams, I should say. And it's not that your dreams at Pinda were not valid. I mean, they were amazing. The work you did there was great, but it helped you grow. And as a result, your path has grown, and that helped you lift you up onto newer and new
yeah,
adventures, I should say.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think fortunately the time that I spent at Pinder, what I've learned there and what I've experienced, and I've now been able to sort of take that to, I think, a much greater scale. The projects that we have now in my new sort of role and within my new team, they projects, yeah, I mean, all over, pretty much all over Africa, and they are on a massive scale. We're talking millions of hectares, thousands of square kilometers now, and all the aspects that I've sort of and experience that I've learned and developed at Pinder have really enabled me and helped me with these new challenges. So um, yeah, it's been good.
Mm. Back to our conversation in the Jeep when we were waiting for Dr. Mike to show up. It was during COVID. And I even heard it in your voice. Like, when the funds were down, your challenges got greater. And it was a really frustrating time. And I bet you it's probably still is. How do you push through? How do you go through those times and keep moving forward?
Um, yeah, I think it's just when you're doing the work that you do, and it's not every day that you feel rewarded. There's some days where you are completely depleted. Your battery is drained, and you've maybe been overwhelmed by sort of a lot of negative things. You kind of yeah, that's the challenging days. But there are days, most days, you are really rewarded positively by the things that you do. And I think what sort of keeps you going and especially through those challenging. I mean, COVID was a really challenging time. Was the sort of belief that there would, you'd come out of it or come through it. I mean, we all knew that it was something that was going to pass, and so it was just, I think, a case of just enduring and sort of doing the best that you can, every day or every month. And the times would change, and look, I mean, it has changed. Things have got easier. Some things have got more challenging and difficult, but I think generally things have improved. And we not, during COVID, it was really tough financially. Where we just didn't have the funds to do what we wanted to do, so you just had to scale back and make a plan. So yeah, I think yeah, just knowing that things would change and there was sort of light at the end of the tunnel, and the cause that we were, we had animals to look after still, and they didn't know about COVID, and we just had to make a plan, and push through. So that's, I think, what kept us going.
Except for what's happening, adjust the plan and know that it's temporary and just keep pushing through.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I think adversity is always temporary. There's and it's only through um you know adjusting, making a plan, just being positive, hard work. The adversary will pass, and I think as long as we always remember that some days are more challenging, and some situations are more adverse, but you just have to endure and be positive and have a good team around you, and I guess provide inspiration and motivation, and the teamwork will come through, and yeah, and you're not gonna. I think you're not gonna win every battle. That's the other thing. It's like there are things, or there are situations that you're not gonna achieve your goals, and you just have to accept that, and then move on. So
yeah.
yeah,
Just like the cheetah we tried to save. We tried to save her and
yeah,
we just
yeah.
didn't make it. The rest.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but yeah, it was a sad story in the end. She didn't make it in the end, but we gave it a best shot,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunately life, and that's also nature. The work that we do, we can't save every single thing, every single uh, individual, but as long as you looking after the collective, and yeah, and there's, today there's a thriving cheetah population, at Pinda, and I think there always will be, as long as you sort of make sure you look after the collective, and do your best to try and save the individuals, where you can. Some are not going to make it, and yeah, like that one, and yeah, but we always know that others will, so yeah, that story didn't end, um,
But
but there are many others that do.
your advice is solid. I mean, that is that you can apply that to anything. Like it's great for wildlife conservation because it's so emotional and it's so intense. But you could apply that advice to anyone. Like you have to be able to adjust. You have to accept what's really happening and just stay positive and push through. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you can apply that to any challenge in life.
Yes.
What do you love most about what you do?
Um, yeah, it's a good question. I think you know the positive impact that we have on, um, you know well, now it's different to Pinder, because it's a much greater area. We're having a real positive impact on the planet. And the areas that I work in now are some of the probably the most degraded landscapes in Africa. They're the places that are under the most extreme pressure from people, from drought, from climate change, from poaching, from they really are under pressure. And so it's knowing that whatever we do is making a difference. It might not be on a grand scale now because we're just starting out, but I think we will make a difference, a big difference in years to come. And these are huge areas. These are areas, millions of hectares, thousands of kilometers squared. And I think for me that's what I love the most is knowing that everything we do is making a difference, a positive difference. Yeah.
I actually don't know much about your new role. Do you mind sharing a little more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I work for a non-governmental organization called Conserve Global, and it's really a new organization. It's only sort of 3 years old, and our focus is on the areas that are outside of national parks. They community conservancies, hunting blocks, buffer areas, communal areas. These are areas that have been really, really neglected, by governments, or people that live in them, and they don't have as high a sort of a protection status as a national park, but they serve a really important function. They large in area. They still have relatively intact natural vegetation and some wildlife, but they just over the years been neglected. They're sort of areas that connect also the national park. So they're sort of the connective tissue of nature, basically, the remaining natural areas that we have. So we have projects in Namibia, in the Kaneni Highlands near Etosha. These are communal conservancies or areas that are administered by communities, but through a depletion or lack of funds, unsustainable trophy hunting, climate change, they really are degraded. These are places where people still live. They live in them, and they've dedicated these places to nature, and trying to derive a benefit or some kind of livelihood from nature. And they're just struggling. The economics through COVID or drought and these sort of things. They're struggling to survive. So, and then we have a project in northern Zambia next to one of the national parks. It's a game management area, so it's designated, for communities and sustainable harvesting of, wildlife and trees and grass and fish and all these sort of things. So these are areas where people can live and come in and harvest the natural resources, but again, through various reasons, the model is not working. So our organization comes in and obviously we work very closely with communities or government agencies, and we provide funding, and we provide sort of management activities to try and improve these areas, improve the livelihood of the people living there, improve the wildlife, and hopefully in the long term create a model that can be that can enrich the people that live and depend on the natural resources that are there. Unlike national parks, in national parks, people can't really access them, or come in and harvest the natural resources, because they the status and the laws prohibit it. But in these sort of buffer areas, the local inhabitants, can utilize the resources much more freely, and that's the aim, is to allow that, or provide a mechanism for them to harvest the natural resources sustainably. So, yeah, we have also a project in Mozambique, and we've got a project in Cameroon, and we're looking at other project sites in Kenya, Tanzania, Botswana, and a few other places. So yeah, we're a small organization that's growing, but our focus is not on national parks like some of the other organizations. It's on these sort of marginal, distressed sort of areas around the national parks
that need it the most.
yeah, and yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, and from my understanding, like for wildlife conservation to be really successful, it's the ecosystem has to be thriving. And in order for the ecosystem to be thriving, you have to take all species, including humans, living in harmony. And it's community and collaboration. And
Yeah.
it seems like that's what you guys are, you're taking that, your skills, your expertise, your knowledge, your passion, and being able to take it where it's needed most right now.
Yeah, definitely. And also it's the areas that connect. I mean, connectivity is really important, and it's the areas that connect these national parks, these sort of islands of conservation and wildlife and biodiversity. And we're trying to ensure that connectivity is maintained, So yeah, that's what we're focusing on. And obviously I think what is really, really key is that the people that live around these places and a lot of these people bear the brunt of wildlife. They the ones that suffer from elephant crop raiding and lions and leopards eating their livestock and so we want to change that narrative. We want them to see conservation as benefiting them, but in order to do that, they need to see the benefits of it. So that's what we focusing on. Very much community focused and driven.
Living in harmony. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you're probably not going to retire anytime soon, but what is something that you would love to see in wildlife conservation before you hang up your hat?
Retiring.
Retire.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll ever retire, but yeah, I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I wasn't doing something every day. But yeah, I'd love to see our conservation areas grow. And there's a lot of there's a big drive now to increase our conservation areas and increase biodiversity, and that's what I'd love to see. Our areas are really, really under pressure. Nature's really under pressure, and yeah, and also to find a model that that ensures that people living around these protected areas, around these parks benefit. They see the benefit of nature. I think that's where people see wildlife as their enemy often. They're always in conflict with wildlife and wild animals because it impacts their livelihood. And I think I would love to see a way where people embrace conservation or embrace wildlife, and it becomes their their choice of land use, rather than growing crops or having cattle, that brings human beings into conflict with nature. If we can find a way to grow nature or grow wildlife that benefits people, that's what I would love to see, is that model. And I think we still haven't got it right. A lot of places, there's a fence that divides nature and people, because it's to try and keep them apart, because of that conflict. And if there's a way that we can sort of drop these fences and have people live with wildlife in such a way that they firstly choose it, that's their choice, and then secondly get benefits from it. That's what I'd love to see.
Yeah.
We have to. Yeah.
Before I got into wildlife conservation, I was involved in environmentalism, and I went to a symposium on wildlife conservation, and one of the speakers, he said, all these nonprofits, all these people that they are doing this great work, it's great that they're doing it, but until we have a shift of consciousness, will there really be a difference? It's with how humans view nature, and as it views to something, it's as opposed to conflict, something that we can live in harmony with. And that was like, oh, I get it. We have to have a shift of consciousness in order or there to be an actual change. And we need to have that shift in order for us to survive at the end of it, for humans to survive. If we don't start living in harmony with nature and start, how do I say, just depleting it, we're not going to have a home for ourselves. So you and I love our work because we love to save the animals, but at the end of the day, our work it has to be done in order for humanity to survive. Because if we don't have this relationship with nature, we're going to keep on destroying it and at the end of the day, losing our own habitat. So there's so many levels of goodness that comes out of wildlife conservation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as human beings, we need nature. We need to live in nature. We need to be with nature, for our own mental health. And I think people forget that. We always look at nature as something that we must eat. In nature we talk. We can. Nature's about soil, and it encompasses all of those things. But I think soil, grass, trees, we need all those things to survive. But I think what people forget is that we also need it for our own mental health, and mental state. If we deplete nature, we're going to become crazy. It's not good for our mental health. And I think people that generally live in nature or with nature are much happier, as themselves, as people, and then also as societies, and I think that's something that we forget, and we actually need nature for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, when I was getting my ecotherapy certification, ecotherapy is healing with nature, and it was brought to our attention. Humans been living in harmony with nature for tens of thousands of years. And it wasn't until we started building cities and we pulled ourselves away from nature, then we started getting more illnesses into our culture. And then technology pulled us away even more from nature. And you nailed it. Our mental health is at its worst. And there's a correlation there. It's the fact the more we pull away from nature, the more we pull away from who we really are, it affects us mentally. And to counter that is to get back into nature and to connect with it again.
Yeah, 100%.
This has been great. Thank you for this conversation. If anyone is inspired, I'm sure people will be inspired by this conversation. How can they keep in touch with you? How can they, like, social media, donate, volunteer? How can they be involved? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I do have an Instagram account. So I mean, I don't post as much as I used to when I was at Pinder, but people can find me there on Simon James Naylor on Instagram. And the organization that I work for now, Conserve Global, you can find the work that we do there. And then obviously working at Pinder and beyond, I mean, they're pretty well known. I mean, you just have to search Pinder Private Game Reserve. They do incredible work, conservation work there, and the organization is and beyond. I still, stay in touch with them and follow the great work that they still do. So that's where you can find me, and obviously there's so many different causes, out there. It's hard to sort of pinpoint one or two, but if someone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to sort of direct them in the right direction, to a good cause, or if they want to volunteer, there's still organizations that are really, really worthwhile volunteering for. So that's where I am. That's where you can find me.
I appreciate it, because we need to get more people part of the involved in giving back and helping out. So thank you so much for taking the time to share all this with us. And until next time, thank you so much.